I would like to welcome you all, and we've got questions from you guys, and as the evening goes along and you hear us speak, you're going to probably think of some more stuff. So first of all, I'd like to start out this evening by just making a little bit of a personal announcement that affects kind of all of us on the stage. I don't know if any of you all knew of an actor by the name of Marge Royce, but I would like to dedicate this evening to Marge. We recently lost her. She had a battle with an illness that finally, unfortunately, got her in the end. But Marge was one of the great union commercial actors. You would know her if you saw her. She's got a Philips commercial running still, I believe. And she was a tremendous proponent and champion of union actors and union work. She was one of the most positive, forward-thinking, incredibly upbeat people that you would ever want to know. And today would have been her birthday. So I would like to dedicate this evening to her. Here's to Marge. To know her was to love her. Anyway, I would like to now kind of move things along and introduce you to our panel. So one by one, I would like to kind of go down the row and have everybody kind of introduce themselves to you and give you a little bit more of an extended background about who they are and how they got into voiceover and what they do in voiceover and what their sense is about voiceover.
Oh,
Joyce
I
Gordon.
Turn the mic on first if I'm going to be a voiceover person.
It's on. It's on. You're on.
It's on?
You're on, babe.
First thing you do is you learn how to work the mic. Well, here I am, and I could probably be the mother or grandmother of a lot of you. But don't go by that, because when I first started, I was a 19-year-old here from Chicago. And I got my first job in radio, because there was no television, there was no taping, there were no voiceovers, there were radio shows that were done live, and there were radio commercials that were done live. Television was not yet operating, really, in terms of using people. So my first work was in radio shows, and I came here and auditioned on a Friday, and on Monday I got the call. And that was the end of going to Syracuse. So I enrolled at NYU, and I started working. A typical radio show then, I think, paid about $30, period. That was it. And it was really a small nucleus of performers. So I started there, ended up doing an extra on the Maggie McNellis television show, moved from there to appearing on Kitty Foyle and Studio One, and soap operas, Edge of Night, Search for Tomorrow, and a couple of guys were my mentors. They were announcers. Announcers were the kings. And they got me a job on live radio, the Kaltenborn News Show, doing a commercial with him. And then it kind of mushroomed. Next thing I knew, I was doing commercials on radio with announcers where the female was the girl.
These were live commercials.
Live. The girl would say, "Oh, it smells so good," while he did the whole thing.
So this is before anything was taped or anything was recorded.
I'm the history of the whole thing. Then, it's true. Then I ended up, I don't remember how, auditioning for Hudson Paper Goods, which in another phrase is toilet paper. And I won it, and I ended up at the theater, live Broadway theater, where we did Price is Right. And I would do the live commercials. And by then, I had, the guy who hired me saw I wore glasses. He said, "So let her wear glasses on camera." And just like that, I established an on-camera persona that made contact with the very audience we were talking to. I went on from there. Those were live commercials. to doing live commercials on Jack Part Tonight Show, Johnny Carson Tonight Show, Steve Allen. I did the Steve Allen show. I was doing a live commercial for the first performance of Mike and Elaine. It was on that show. And I did talk shows, and then I was under contract to Procter & Gamble for 12 years for Crisco
And
and
so
Duncan
all of this
Hines.
was recorded live. Was not recorded. It was just
No,
all live.
all
commercials
live then
on the air.
until in 1953 television film came, tape. And then I did tape commercials, which were all what Crisco and Duncan Hines was. And I don't frankly remember how I got into promos, except one day I got a call. There were no agents then, really. And I got a call from this guy, Bruce Soloway at NBC. He said, "Do you have a tape?" I said, "Yeah, I had an audition tape." He said, "Drop it off for me." So I left it on a Tuesday, and on Wednesday I had a call, be at Studio 6 something, and I walked in, and it was like being thrown into the arena as a gladiator. I mean, it wasn't like anything else. It wasn't, "We'll rehearse." It was just, "Here's the script. You got 6.5 seconds."
This was also live on the air.
No, these were
These were
recorded.
Okay.
So that
So
was
this was 19.
19, that was 19 in the 70s, early 70s. And that's how I got into promos.
Okay. So when did you start doing the recorded commercials?
Oh, 54, 55.
Okay. I want to hold you right there because
Yeah.
I want to come back to this.
Okay.
Okay.
That's enough of me.
For now, but you have no idea. Without Joyce Gordon, we would have no careers up here. Okay. Next, Barbara, please tell us a little bit about you.
Wow. You know, you can see this is not a cardioid mic. You've got to let it follow your voice here. I'm Barbara Rosenblat, and gosh, I love listening to that kind of history. It's spectacular. Some years ago, I did a panel about the evolution of radio, because I do a lot of radio drama, as well as audiobooks and commercials and some TV. And a story was told that I repeated on the panel at the dawn of television, when you started to see little Philips sets on the street and people would watch, you know, a silent ball game behind the glass while they were selling televisions in those days. It was the early days of TV, and a small boy was interviewed by someone on television who came up to him and said, "So, kid, what do you think of radio and TV? Which do you like better, TV or radio?" And the kid said, "Radio." "Well, why's that, kid?" "The pictures are better." Which sums up one of the things we're doing here, which is the seminal, joyous connection of one voice and a pair of ears. Whether it's an audiobook or a commercial or a documentary or dubbing a movie and making some actor sound way better than he really does. All of that has factored in to our collective lives as voiceover artists. I consider myself not a narrator of audiobooks. I'm a recording artist. That's what I do, and television as well. I've done theater, Broadway, West End, all kinds of stuff. But I have to say, nothing connects a voice to an audience faster or better than an audiobook. And I've done around 500 of them over the years. Why, thanks. Because I love telling stories. I wrote a book about it. It's a Kindle ebook. It's fun. And that's small and it's slight, but everyone has asked me for so many years, how do you do this? And how do you create characters and sustain them, for God's sake, and all of that. So I took it upon myself to answer those questions. But for me, don't pop your peas, Rosenblat. But for me, I would always tell anybody, anything with a script and a microphone, I'm there. Even my radio station at college, City College, I went to City College. Go City College, yeah! Go CUNY. If it's good enough for Colin Powell, it's good enough for me. WCCR, Radio 640 on your AM dial. And if you were in the exact right spot in the quadrant with your car, if you had one, maybe you could pick up a signal. It was great. Early days of radio, spectacular. I triple-tracked myself because we had nobody else. So I would triple-track myself in 3-part harmony to do promos for fellow on-air DJs and things. And then there was college, and I went to London, and I worked there for 14 years in theater, voiceovers, and then audiobooks. And so when people ask me what's my favorite thing to do, I tell them my favorite thing to do is the thing that's in front of me. So I'm privileged to be in this company, that's for sure. And I'm very glad you're here because this evolution is an ongoing, organic thing with my colleagues and with you. And at some point, I have no doubt we'll find each other behind the same microphone.
Thank you. Thanks. Lisa Fischoff.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa Fischoff, and I, unlike all of these super talented ladies, I do not come from an acting background, but I am a casting director for commercials, mostly voiceover and on camera, and I have a tremendous respect for the community of actors in New York. I started my journey in this world of voiceover casting. I was reading scripts in development for Fox 2000, and I worked for 20th Century Fox. It was sort of their female division. Laura Rosenthal at the time was heading it, and I got really bored when someone would say, "You've got 5 scripts to read and do coverage for by Monday," and I got really bored doing it because it was just not for me. So what I started to do to pass the time was I started to think about all of my friends and actors, and I just always had a knack for remembering actors, whether big, small, guest appearances, and I just had this knack for it, and I said, someone must do this for a living. So I got a book at the Shakespeare Bookshop, I think it was, and it was the Casting Society of America. And I went and called random casting directors in New York for film. And I worked as an intern for Bonnie Timmerman and for Ellen Chenoweth. And, in my mid-20s, I went from having a very nice paying job to interning because I really wanted to do it. And my parents were super, super supportive. So I worked on Armageddon with Bonnie Timmerman and Pushing Tin with Ellen Chenoweth, and then I went and got my first paying job in film as an assistant casting person for a woman named Kathleen Chopin, and halfway through the movie, they pulled the money. And so it was my first venture getting paid for casting, but I realized that I don't think freelancing is for me. So I was looking for a job, and I promised my father I would say this because it is true, and I always say this. My father was reading The Hollywood Reporter, and he's a composer, and he saw that a woman named Liz Lewis was casting a movie called Killing Cinderella and called her and said, "My daughter needs a job." And actually spoke with one of the casting people there, and she said, "We're actually looking for an assistant, but it's commercials, it's not film." So my father said, "Let me talk to my daughter, and I so appreciate, your help and all." So I went to the interview. And I didn't know anything about the commercial world. And I thought I wanted to cast film, but I wanted a full-time job, but I was very, very torn. I didn't know anything about voiceover. I thought, oh, you mean like cartoons and stuff? And I took the job as an assistant, and I sat in the studio after a few months of putting out times and schedules. I sat in the studio with my now business partner, Stacy Seidel-T, and she said to me, "You're going to love voiceover casting or you're going to hate it by the end of the day." And I fell in love with the process. I fell in love with actors coming in and interpreting scripts differently throughout the day, that there's such life in this city and such talent in the commercial world and in all areas of acting, but I quickly learned that voiceover was like any other area of the craft of acting. You had to train, you had to make your connections, you had to be serious about it, because if you weren't, there were 300 people behind you that wanted to do it. So I quickly rose the ranks at Liz's and became a full casting director, and in 2005, Stacy and I left to start Broadcasters, and HSR, Howard Schwartz Recording, took us on and funded us, and he believed in us, and he started our brand, basically. And we were there for several years, and in July we will have our 10-year anniversary. Thank you so much. And I do love what I do. Do I love it every second of every day? No. But I really feel grateful that I can come to panels like this and hear so much wonderful history from such a talented group of ladies that are serious about this business and impart their wisdom to help you guys out. So that's really my story. Thank you.
And Nancy Giles.
Well, you know, it's funny, this is on. When you asked us to provide these bios and whatnot, I thought, oh, great, so it's taken care of, it'll be in the program, you know, and then, then when it was decided backstage, oh, we'll all talk a little bit about ourselves, my stomach lurched, because I'm great answering questions and stuff, but sort of going on about, so I'm going to try to do this very quickly. I've done TV series, I've done little parts in movies. Right now, I work most regularly on CBS giving opinions. And the thing about the voiceover work, which has kind of always been a steady, is that it really is like, as I found my voice as a human being, I sort of found my voiceover voice too. It's this strange sort of connection. I always loved radio growing up in New York City. I always loved AM radio, FM radio, WNEW, AM and FM, and I love listening to radio theater, and I can remember hearing War of the Worlds when they rebroadcast that as a small child and just like really being transfixed. And when I was in college, I was the director of a radio theater college group at Oberlin. Rah! Okay, nobody's from Oberlin. Okay, and I ended up doing voiceovers kind of by accident. An agent, Stephen Arcieri, saw me in a show back in the 80s. Please don't be offended by the title. The show was a political satire called "Oh You Hostage!" exclamation point. But it was like a comedy. Right, it was. Anyway, I played various roles, and Stephen liked what he saw and said something about come and meet me and handed me a card. And I knew about commercials, but I never really knew about voiceovers in particular. I could recognize people's voices when I heard them, and I knew whose voices I liked and didn't, but I've been doing that kind of work, for, golly Moses, for 29 years. And thank you. And I've had some very big dry spells in there, but I'm most grateful to my agents and to really thoughtful casting directors who kind of thought outside the box and didn't freak out when they saw me and think, oh, all she can do is, girlfriend, I told you that you know, things have changed. No, I mean, I can do that, but that's a whole, we'll get into that, but I mean, I was able to, I'm from Queens, I'm not putting on airs, I went to public schools, this is how I talk, you know, it's not being snotty or not being black. But there were real barriers with that, and Cunningham, Escott, Slevin, Darity, my agents, just always pushed the envelope. So I got to be one of the few black female voices for like mainstream things, not just Afro Sheen and Ultra Sheen, which I use. but things like the New York Times and Tide detergent, things that everybody uses. So anyway, I'm very proud to be with this august group of talented women, and that's kind of the short part of my story. Thank you.
Thank you. The lovely Jessica Cannon.
Hi, I'm Jessica Cannon. I am the JV player to these varsity women. So I started in this business probably about 12 years ago. I went to school for music in Indiana, and I minored in theater. And when I came to New York, someone told me, go to every single audition you can possibly go to, get backstage, just go and audition so you get better at auditioning. So I did that, and I went, I don't know, to so many auditions, it's not even funny. And one of those was an open call for a children's TV show. It was to be a host for a children's TV show. And I booked that, and it was called Harmony Square, and it was Jessica's house in Harmony Square. And I had puppets that I spoke to. And it was produced in Connecticut. It never went anywhere, but it was a great experience, and the production company, the people who were in the production company really liked me, and so they ended up using me for a lot of other videos. So I did industrials and cartoons, I did some narration of children's books, all sorts of things, how to be a good citizen. And I got to practice in a low-pressure environment in Bristol, Connecticut, which was great. It was like a little bit of grad school for voiceover and working with a teleprompter and being on camera. And during that time, my dad was an actor when I was a little girl, and he had friends who were still in the business, and one of them was Arista Beltronis, who was head of casting at Gray Advertising, and my dad said, why don't you go meet with Arista? She can give you some advice. And I was like, whatever, Dad. And so I went to meet with Arista, and she was so lovely and had just so much great advice for me, and she sent me to meet with Barbara Coleman at Innovative Artists, and Barbara started sending me out, and I think I booked maybe the second thing, which was so lucky, because I didn't get lost in the pile. And from there, I booked more on camera stuff initially, and then I started doing voiceover. And my first voiceover jobs were probably mostly cheerleader parts, or asking my mom for more wireless minutes, and and things like that, or for toys and Barbie. But then as I became an adult, I started being accepted as an adult and as an announcer. So I don't know if you want to talk about, we'll talk about the different spots we've done, but my bio is considerably shorter than these amazing women. So.
Could I just say one thing? Yes, please. Thank you. I just want to say one thing that is proven by all of our bios. I have never, ever, if someone asks me what I do, or responded when someone says that, said, I'm a voiceover. Never. I'm an actor. I also do voiceovers. We're actors. We've done all kinds of things, and it takes your full talent. As a trained actor, I studied with Stella Adler and David Alexander to even do a voiceover, to do anything. But whether you're doing a narration or a kiddie show or an interview show, you're taking your acting talent and developing it. That's all I want to say. There's no such thing as a voiceover.
Absolutely. I'm going to piggyback onto what you just said, and I'm just going to give you a little history of mine. I'm so dull compared to these other women. I can't even tell you. But I came from a singing background, so I've always had a mic in my hand, which is where I'm the most comfortable. Come from a little bit of an acting background, but primarily I started out as a singer. And I remember when I first started doing voiceovers, and I put a very bad reel together and didn't know it at the time, but I went to interview with a couple of different agents through friends, introductions, and one agent listened to my reel and he said, you know, I know a lot of singers that try to get into this work, and they really can't do it. They really don't quite get it. And so good luck. Don't let the door hit you in the ass on the way out. So anyway, fast forward, and long story short, I wound up getting an agent who kind of saw my potential and kind of built my career with him. And then fast forward about, 5 years later, and I wound up signing with the agent who originally said that I couldn't do it, and I book a lot of my work through him now. I kind of came, as I was working as a singer, and I was making a living as a singer, and I just thought, I was getting to be a certain age, and I just thought, this is not going to look good in another 10 years if I don't start making some money. So let me just get into voiceovers to supplement my career. I'll just do it as an aside kind of thing, because you can make some money at it, right? So I realized, as we all know, that this is not something that you just do as an aside. You have to put 150% of your attention into whatever it is that you're doing, whether it's learning a monologue for a theatrical piece, or learning lines for a movie, or understanding the craft of voiceover. So I just kind of walked into a door that, thank God, opened for me in a way that some musical doors did not. And I wound up falling in love with the work so much that instead of it supplementing me, it kind of became what I do. So for the last 20 years, this has kind of been my main bread and butter. But everybody has sort of brought an interesting concept and perspective to this in the sense that whatever you do informs that work. And the thing that I like so much about voiceover work is that there is an intimacy to it. And you can relay so much, not just with the sound of your voice, but with the emotional intention behind it. And so it is an acting piece. Every piece of copy is a little 3-act play. You've got a setup, you've got a body, you've got a conclusion, you've got a point of view, you've got rhythm, you've got pitch, you've got nuance, you've got intention. So it's, I think we all take this very seriously. And I want to talk a little bit about how, we're talking about the evolution of women in voiceover, and there's been an evolution in voiceovers in general, but in terms of women, now I wanted everybody to kind of, address this in terms of how you have felt as a female in this end of the business, what kind of challenges you feel you may have met, or what kind of advantages you feel you might have. When you started out, Joyce, it was primarily a boys' club, right? And so you kind of got in there, and as the years progressed, have you seen the things that you've sold change? Have you seen the approaches to voiceover change?
Oh, yeah. First of all, for a long time, it was a beautiful voice, whether you were male or female. Your relative would say, my cousin has a wonderful voice. Well, it's not a wonderful voice anymore. It's still a voice, but it doesn't have to be whether you're male or female. It can be a grubbly voice, it can be a squeaky voice, it's how you get the copy across. And I have always had one solid line that I say to anyone who wants to do it. It all starts with copy. And I approach it from an actor's approach. What's your intention? My intention is to make you see why Easy Off will get everything off your oven. My approach is, what is my objective? To sell you Easy Off. But what is my relation to you? To make it warm, to make you understand it, to show I understand it. You have to know what you're saying. I know this sounds crazy, but I stood in a studio, I'll never forget it, with a top male voice. And we were working to picture. If you don't know what that means, it means you are seeing the picture in front of you and you're recording while you're watching it. So if it says she lifts the bottle and takes a sip and sighs, you're going to time it so that you're saying she lifts the bottle and takes a sip when she does it. I was great working with picture. We also dubbed Italian films like mad. But I'm working with this top guy, and we are on tape 24. And he can't time it. And I suddenly look over at him, and I said, Glenn, you don't look at the picture. He said, oh, no, if I did, I'd lose my place. I almost died. So there are many skills that you will have to develop. One is the ability to get off the page. One is the ability, if you're going into an audition, don't read it 40 times outside. You want to be open to what they may be looking for. Absolutely. I once went up to read for an air conditioning commercial at Y&R. Everybody was sitting there because it was all about BTUs and what have you. And I read it twice. And I went in, and what do you think the commercial was? A sexy, sultry vixen making love to the air conditioner. Now, if I'd absolutely developed all that technical stuff, well, I got the job. So don't over-rehearse. And when you go in, ask, is there going to be music with this? Right. What kind of music? That'll help you get the tone. And what are the pictures if they haven't been smart enough to give you a storyboard? So give yourself, just like an actor would in a play or a soap opera or anything, give yourself every advantage to help you produce the right result.
Thank you. Barbara, have you seen the business change since you've been doing voiceovers and...
Kind of. But were you all just paying attention to the golden nuggets that you just heard? I hope you took notes. Well, it's going to be online, isn't it? Or that's good. Pay attention. This
from the golden ager.
I'm in a world. Has the business changed? Is that what you're asking?
Have you noticed?
Have I noticed it? I've noticed that, like you've said, the requirements have changed because quirky is in, rather than, as you pointed out, that sweet, adorable voice that sells the pie. Now can sound like someone deranged and who should be at Rikers by 7. Because quirky is in. You have to pay attention to what it is you're doing. What I find interesting is that not only have the requirements of voiceover changed, the market for what you actually do as a voiceover artist has changed. A few years back, I did Grand Theft Auto. That gave me street cred until Orange came along. And I played some character that the animation had already been done. I was playing a tall, ambisexual cokehead by the name of Rennie Wasselmeyer, who says things like, "Give me some blow, darling, come here." You know, you weren't quite sure if it was male, female. It's great. I auditioned, I got the job, it was thrilling. But I had to do something I'd never heard of before called motion capture. Now, motion capture has evolved like crazy over the last few years. I just did a full outfit motion capture thing for a super secret video games coming out in June. And, you know, like Andy Serkis wearing these wetsuits with little baubles on and a head cam with a microphone on it. It's the wildest experience. It's a lot of fun. But when I did motion capture, to reflect on the story that you just told about that fellow who says, "I'm going to lose my place," what they did to do Grand Theft Auto, I did 2 of them actually, is they would put you in a studio, they'd animate the character, right? So you'd see the avatar, that was a new word for me, the avatar of the person with no face, right? And they have a camera on you in a graph, so to speak, a grid on camera. And with your X-ray vision, you stare through the camera at the script with the director in the corner sort of egging you on, and you record as still as you know how, but as animatedly as possible. the role in front of you. And that's what I did. So everything you do is an adjustment. Whatever it is, you're working with your voice. If you're doing wipes in ADR, ADR is dialogue replacement. What's the A? Audio dialogue, yeah, that's right, whatever it is.
We used to call it dubbing.
We called it dubbing too, and here they call it looping, which is very bizarre. You know, with all the technical stuff involved, it ain't just about the voice. It's the voice married to the tools, keeping your eyes on the journey that you're on. Because in an audiobook, or as you mentioned, in a commercial, you're always telling a 3-act play. And your protagonist always wants something. He needs to have, any acting teacher will tell you, the main character, whoever it is you're playing, you're on a journey. There's something you want. And the audience, you invest that performance in them by making that journey clear through your interpretive skills. And with all those interpretive skills, you still need X-ray vision, you still need to watch a meter where there are numbers and seconds going by in a hurry, and there's also, through the glass, 4 people who are 12 years old each going,
I don't know. And then don't you find also when you're doing an audiobook, it's kind of the opposite of that? You have to do kind of go into an intimate sort of place when you're telling a story?
yes, you do. But again, it's a journey. And along with the script review that you were talking about, I read an audiobook once, slowly, and create my audio landscape as stuff occurs to me, so that I remain fresh and can bring the same interest that you might have had just putting eyes to the page. Because that magic has to stay up there. You need to stay loose and fresh, and it all has to happen like it's never, ever happened before.
Yeah, I kind of equate that as, singing jazz. You have to have your chops together, but then you go in and you improvise, and it's in the moment. Right. So,
I mean,
yeah.
I'm a scat singer, so I understand that, absolutely.
And don't listen to how you sound. Just concentrate on what you're saying.
Your point of view. So, Lise, I'm interested in hearing from a casting director's point of view how you've seen the casting process change in terms of breakdowns that you get, in terms of direction from clients that you get, what they're looking for, how you've seen that evolve over the last 10, 15 years.
When I first got into commercial casting, voiceover casting, I always, when I speak at schools and things, there were, 30 or 40 people that booked everything, and there really wasn't a lot of room for newer people at the time. Clients were really comfortable with the people that they knew. They didn't want, a lot of people on a casting tape or CD or whatever. And there were certain trends that sort of went by the wayside and never really came back. For example, when I first started, the big announcer was just getting out of a vein. When I first started casting, I was very intimidated by a lot of the actors that, had been doing this for a really long time, and sort of, they really didn't want to veer from what they thought the client wanted, and who was I? And I know what they want, kid, don't worry.
And that was just the women.
And I don't really begrudge that. I mean, I had respect for them, and they had been successful in their crafts, but times were changing, and trends were changing, and voice quality was changing, and then women started booking like really big accounts, cars and things like that, and banks that always went to men. And not only did women start booking these very big accounts, but the types of women vocally started to change. There was something called the Volkswagen read that was really in vogue, and it was, we always have to like you, but we want to feel like you don't care and that you'd be an idiot not to buy a Volkswagen, you know? And it was this really hard balance, but these women that were serious about their craft, they knew how to interpret it and how to deliver that. And I think, you know, as people got older and as clients started to realize that they were losing some accounts and things, and newer producers would come in and account people, they wanted to not hear the people that they heard for the last 15 years. We want some new people. We know who those people are. And so as a casting director, we started to do things like go to theater more, or we would go to college showcases and things like that, and comedy clubs. Comedy clubs was big. You know, to go to stand-up. People who do stand-up are great with improv, and that's what it was. They wanted it to be fresh. Tell them to make the copy fresh. Okay. You know, and you're not allowed to say, you can improv for an audition. You're not allowed to, as a casting person, I'm not allowed to say that. So it was just this interesting change, you know. Clients were more open to interpretation of what the copy was and different styles of voice, and like Barbara said, the quirky thing became really popular, the edgy thing became really popular, and it wasn't about a sweet, middle America, warm voice. It had to have something that stood out, and that varied with each job that we cast. And one of the biggest changes that I feel I have noticed over the last 7 or 8 years is that when I get a job to cast, that it's not, well, we want to see men or we want to see women. It's we want a day of men and a day of women, because we're not sure what we're going to go with.
Now let me ask you something. When you get a breakdown like that, because as an actor, when I'm walking in and I see a breakdown like that, and they're seeing men and they're seeing women, oftentimes I'll walk in and I'll go, okay, this is going to go to a man. Now, am I crazy, or is that, do you see a larger percentage of that actually happening?
I think a larger percent of it is happening. I'm just going to give you this one example, and this isn't voiceover, but it's really I think it's an interesting story. I do all of the host casting at my office, and I was hired by a big client of mine, Time Inc., to cast for a Sports Illustrated web series where a football fanatic was going to have to go to the Big Ten schools for 10 weekends in a row, everything paid for and a nice salary, and they were going to have to speak to Heisman Trophy winners, former Heisman Trophy winners. I don't know anything about football. My clients came to every session. We cast for a week straight, men and women. And I thought, you know, someone would talk about football, and I would say, well, they really know a lot. And they would say to me, no, they watch television, they watch it with their girlfriend. No, no. And they hired a woman. And from that job, she went on to ESPN, and she went on to some really great things. And I was so proud. It was between a man and a woman. It was between the two of them. And I think in my head, are they going to go with the guy, football? But they didn't. They went with the woman. And not only did they go with the woman, but it wasn't this sort of one-off job. You know, she looked at it as, wow, I've got something big here that I can really use to promote myself for future jobs. And she became a correspondent on sort of a ESPN sort of show channel thing. I don't know much about sports. But it started her journey in that world based on what I normally would think a man would book.
What would you say the current trends are right now in terms of casting?
I think the current trends, I will tell you that the ages have broadened a lot. I will get a breakdown that will say we want to cast 20s to 50s. Really? Because sometimes I think one of the trends, they don't know how old or young a voice is really going to fit. Whereas I felt like when I first started casting, it was 20s, edgy, you know, wry. And now I think the ages have broadened in terms of the chances of you possibly getting something that you might not usually audition for. I think the trends still are very not announcery. I mean, if I had a nickel, you know, if I had a nickel for every time I heard that, I would be, you know, retired. So not announcery, friendly, warm. But the one thing that hasn't changed at all is what Joyce and Barbara were saying about connecting with the copy and connecting as an actor with what you're saying. And I need to believe as the consumer, as the viewer, that you are just talking to me. And, you know, I did a seminar once, and one of the actors who was trying to get into voiceover, she said, you know, I don't believe I would talk like this. And I said, well, the producers are going to get that right away from when you audition. They are going to, if you're not connecting as an actor with a piece of voiceover copy, it will be audible immediately. You're part of a production. The production goes from, you know, my ad agency getting the actual account. They want to do a commercial. They call me and say, we want to cast. Here's the specs. Here's the auditions. Here's the person we want. That person goes into the booth, and you're part of that whole process of that production. And, you know, I really feel like it's an important part of the production that's so subtle in many ways to sort of the everyman, but to people like us that are in the business, it really does make the difference in terms of when you're watching that commercial or listening to the radio, bringing life to a product in ways that if you're not an actor and really in it, you're not going to be able to do it. You can't fake it.
And the other thing is, we're kind of the last piece of the puzzle that goes in. You know, by the time you do a final spot, when you're in the studio and all the clients are there and everybody's there, they've shot what they're going to shoot. They've got the copy is done. They've got the music picked out. You have to kind of bring it home. So you're the heart and the soul of the commercial, really. It's the voice. And when you think about it, it is the most intimate part of it because you can relay so much emotion. And you might have one sentence to say or two words to say, but if you're not emotionally connected to the entire process of the commercial, you know, you've lost the audience. So, you know, to kind of piggyback onto what everybody else is saying, you have to have an emotional point of view that is honest and that is authentic and that is believable. So, you know, a lot of people think it's about the voice, as you said. That's what I call working from the outside in. You have to work from the inside out, and I think that's kind of what we're saying.
You also might be working against, as you said, copy that belies the way you normally talk.
Right.
You know, tell me a story by saying, introducing the only Depends you'll ever need. You know, how natural can you make that? Well, that's your job, to make it natural. So I would advise, and I'm sure my colleagues here would agree, because things are changing and because the subject of this evening's presentation is the evolution of voiceover, listen to the radio. Listen to different stations. Listen to how stuff is sold on the radio and on television. Close your eyes when you hear the commercials. Don't cut them out. Don't, when you've got a DVR, right, and you want to whiz through them, your homework when you get home tonight, no whizzing through. Listen to those voices. Hear where the changes are. Hear what's cool today. And then you'll have more arrows in your quiver, so that when you bring your presence and your A game and your storytelling skills, you will also have what's current lurking back here. And you can drag it out in the short space of time you're blessed with at an audition and hopefully ultimately at the recording session.
Or what Jill said, listen and you'll know what they're buying right now. There's nothing wrong with knowing that. I mean, that's essential. Know your market.
Yep. Nancy, how have you seen in your evolution personally in voiceovers, how have you seen things change?
Well, there's the two main categories. I think Lisa covered at least one of them, which is that women are doing a lot of products that used to be exclusively men's. anything that was like important, money oriented. Finance, men do it. You know, cars, banks, those type of things. Newspapers, big important things. So that's a really cool thing. And it's funny, Sara, because we're friends and I see you at auditions all the time. Whenever I see that they are seeing men and women, I go, yeah, right on. Because I feel like we should be there, you know? I really do. And in the early days when those auditions weren't open, you know, I was kind of PO'd. The other big evolution, because I can't really separate being female from being African American, is what I mentioned to start with, which is that there's much less, although it still exists, and these are just my opinions. I do not represent the entire African American voiceover community. African Americans are women. I'm just me. This is just my opinions. Having said that. Yeah, no, I have to, because then people will like, how could you have said that about us? And I'm like, I'm talking about me. I'm just relaying these experiences. There seems to be less ghettoizing of black, recognizably black voices, and there also is a wider allowance that's wider, not whiter, wider, allowance for all kinds of ways to sound and be black. My big thing when I started was I would get that from, not my agents, but I would get it from a lot of casting people. You don't sound black. Are you, you know, where are you really from? Stop sounding like you went to college. You know, did you take speech lessons? Give me what you can really, give me street, you know. People would, you know, give me some of this, you know, I'd get. Right, I mean, and we're actors, so I would do it, but it was just like playing a role, but I was, again, PO'd about constantly getting that type of node. And luckily, things did start to change, and well, before they started to change, they sort of went worse for me. I got a television series and moved to California, and because I was on TV, I thought when I sent out my, my voiceover demos, I thought I'll put my picture on it so that people will go, oh, she was on China Beach. Okay, so as soon as that happened, the different auditions that I used to get, they evaporated, and all I was getting were auditions for like Hair Relaxer and Colt 45. Okay? Because sometimes information was not power. Information would be frightening to some people. I was in recording studios when clients would come in and look at me and jump and say, who am I? And I'd say, you know, I'm the voice. You know, I'd be in waiting rooms sometimes for products and sometimes be the only black woman there and have other talent, in a friendly way, say, are you sure you're at the right audition? This is, you know, Ivory Snow, and I'd say, well, yeah, actually, yeah, that I'm supposed to be here. But things have changed. It's wonderful how things have changed. The big thing that changed things for me was that after a really long spell of not getting any work, and I think getting older and getting more, you know, finding my voice and sort of maturing, when I came back to New York, I booked a really wonderful campaign for the New York Times, and it was a network campaign, and it was white guys and me. I don't know how my agent finagled it, but I got it,
that
and
campaign.
yeah, it was a beautiful campaign, and I think Joyce, I think both of you have mentioned when you're in a room and the images are really beautiful and the music is really beautiful. It is a very wonderful, creative moment to sort of weave your voice in there and know that you're creating, you know, a 15, a 30-minute or a 60-second piece of art. Yeah. That's how I felt about it, and something about that campaign, I think, raised my own game, and I was like, you know, I am an actor, I am an artist. I started saying voiceover artist around then. So I'm thrilled. I don't mean to, you know, say there was, well, the discrimination and the bigotry was there. It still comes up every now and then, but it's different, it's better, and I hear more voices out there that are of people of color. I hear more different ways that people are beginning to realize that people of color actually sound, and that to me is a thrill. The only other change that I see that's a little difficult is that, God bless you, with everything that everybody's saying, I also sense this, I can't exactly call it disrespect, but there's something about the work that we do that I feel like gets belittled a lot. And I'll give you one big example. before I turn the mic over to the next person, or she'll take her own mic. Because this really hurt my feelings, because I've done animated voices as well, and this is a hard work. It's a skill. It's not something that's just, you know, easy. But there are different rules for different people, and I'll never forget at the Academy Awards, Chris Rock got up and was joking about how he could say one line 6 times and they just give him $1 million, and that's how easy voiceover is, ha, 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 ha. And I thought, well, it's nice for you. That's great for you, Chris. And we know it's a different thing for well-known people, but oh, that really chapped my ass.
Ditto.
It did. That's not right.
Ditto.
We work hard. Thank you for letting me get that off my chest.
Thank you, Nancy. Jessica, have you, you started out almost kind of as a child actor doing
Kind of,
voiceovers,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So obviously you've seen a change in terms of the types of auditions that you've done, but since you've been working in the 20 to 30 year kind of age range, have you seen in the last couple of years any kind of evolution in terms of what you're going out for?
Well, yeah, I've seen a couple of things. I think there are more women writers in the room now, and there are more women producers, there are more female engineers. It used to be I would go in and record a tampon commercial, and there would be 5 men embarrassingly telling me, you know, when you need extra protection. And I'd be like, yeah, do you? So now it's women, and it's so much more fun to do that kind of thing in a room full of women. So that's great, and it's always great to work with female engineers and female casting directors. So there are more women in the industry in general. And I actually love going out for things when I know men and women are going for it too. I'm competitive, I guess it brings out my competitive spirit. And I've booked a few things where they hired one woman and one man, and we fight to the death, and they decide who they're going to go. And some of them, they've gone with me, and some of them, they've gone with a man, and I'm happy that that's happening. I'm happy that women are doing car commercials.
Right.
There were no car. I remember when I first started, and we all said, "Oh, wouldn't it be so great if we could do a car commercial, or insurance, or banks, any of those things where it was like, ask your husband if you could buy that." Now, right?
Which is interesting too, because you bring up a very interesting point. I did a little research before this panel about, you know, the percentage of women versus men, and the marketing, and how, you know, things are marketed to women. Women do most of the buying in this country,
Including cars.
Yes, including cars, and it's interesting to me because I think that sometimes, you know, you still see casting done in commercial scripts where they seem to be appealing to men, and women occupy so much more of the buying market. So that's just an interesting little factoid.
Well, actually, first of all, I think that we're still dominated by men. I see the pension and health reports, and believe me, the guys are making more money than we are. It's just the way it is. We've made enormous progress, and I think it's wonderful. First of all, more than half the commercials, Lisa, you tell me if I'm not right, on television, and watch yourself and you'll see it's true, are automobiles. In the beginning of television commercials, they weren't allowed to show a Ford commercial closer than 10 minutes to when they showed a Chevy commercial. Now they're one on top of the other. If you turn away, you're actually hearing the spiel for the car you thought you were watching. So a lot has changed. And what has changed, I think, very much, and mind you, they're all a little more au courant than I. I retired 6 years ago, and the last 15 years of my life were predominantly promos for NBC, ABC. I was the first and only woman to announce a convention in 1980. But actually what's happened is that the whole industry now is spread out. New York used to be the home of commercials compared to Hollywood. Then it moved where Hollywood people started to do commercials, and agents out there started to hold auditions for voices in Hollywood. When I started and went to my first meeting of the Screen Actors Guild board in Hollywood, everybody in that room was someone I'd been watching in movies through my childhood. And they thought commercials were the lowest form of man. And now we have Academy Award winners doing on camera. Jennifer Aniston, Matt McConaughey, Julianne Moore, name it. And stars are now doing voiceovers and strongly want to, because it's easy money for them and because it keeps them alive in the public's eye if they're on camera.
And it's sexy for a
Right.
a client.
And now every agent has a recording studio on their premises. That wasn't true 40 years ago, even 30, but the last 25, I think. And now so-called voiceover artists are all over the country. They're working out of garages, they're working out of their dens, they're working out of an office in their house, and with all the technical stuff that all you people know how to do and I love, they send their tapes at NBC. I remember my producer on NBC promo saying, "Joyce, I never see talent anymore. You're the only one who ever comes to the studio." Now I get sent a tape where the guy upstairs says, "Listen, this is a good voice for boxing." So I book the guy, which means I send him, fax him the copy. He records, sends me the thing, and I never see him or meet him or direct him unless I have to say you're a tenth of a second over. So the whole entryway to commercials, I'm not talking about other forms of an actor's career, but to commercials, and I want to say promos, I believe, are now bigger than commercials.
Do you know the difference between a commercial and a promo?
A promo is when you see on NBC tonight, whatever you're seeing.
It's basically an advertisement for a show.
And they're
opposed to a
all
product.
over, and they're in between and at the end of commercials. They're constant, and they're all over the country, because if you're a local radio station or a local television station, you also have to, what they call advertise. Promos are your advertising. Mm-hmm. So people are doing work in voice work that used to have a center, that used to have a solid core, but was changing all the time. And now it's anywhere. Yeah. It's a voice, it's a,
The whole business has changed, and the one thing that I think is a constant in any business is that it will change. It will change. If you get into this business today, in 10 years, you'll have your own stories about how the business changes.
Absolutely.
It's just the nature of how things are, and I think a big mistake that a lot of people make is, boy, you want to hold on to what it was instead of allowing yourself the evolutionary process of moving into the next thing with it. And I think also, Lisa, what you were talking about in terms of the style of voiceover, when I first got into this, the style was very kind of announcery and very sort of music, and then it went out. And then it was conversational, and it don't sound like you have any polish, don't sound. So it always changes, and that's part of being an actor. It's part of being somebody that sells a product. You have to be willing to land with your knees bent and understand what the next thing is, and how can you use your tool to make that happen, your whole being, your experience of life, your vocal understanding, your emotional point of view.
I love that, and without losing yourself,
Yeah.
because that's because it can be really easy to watch and listen and sort of think, okay, oh, they want this, they, but it is good to know about the trends and what's going on.
But know who you are when you walk in the room.
Because I think that's been the biggest thing that helped me, was just sort of settling in my own, sort of in my own skin and finding the right, finding my voice.
Finding your voice, so to speak.
Sort of.
Yeah.
Something I noticed among the women I audition, with whom I audition, sometimes when someone reaches a certain level of success, they think, oh, this is the way a voiceover artist sounds. And so they only speak that way. And while they're in the waiting room, oh, how are you, darling? And they lose their natural way of reading. They lose who they are and what made them interesting in the first place and what made them book in the first place, because of this idea of what a voiceover artist is.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's who are you? Who are you? Because they're not hiring a voice, they're hiring a personality. They're hiring a point of view.
I'm loving where this conversation is going. I'm going a little deaf in my old age because of, 30, you too? Because of, 30 years of wearing headphones, it's a little bit of, never mind. Most folk, you don't even have landlines anymore. Do you know what the crucial difference for me between landlines and cell phones? On a landline, and I've got 2 of them in my house, I can hear my voice amplified in my ear. I'm in control of how I sound when I've done on-the-phone commercials, Yeah. An agent will call me and say, there's this guy in Duluth, where's Duluth, who wants a French voiceover. Could you talk to him so that he can hear, because we're not going to bother with the MP3 and all that stuff. So, he'll call me, not on a cell, God forbid, but on my landline, so that I can say, but it depends, you're wearing. They're the wrong size, my friend. And you wonder why you have an accident.
You're obsessed with Depends, I just have to say. You're obsessed.
I'm just.
But we don't judge.
It's called continuity. but when you can hear what you're doing, which is why I always say wear headphones, it frightens some people to hear their voice back at them. And in the casting world, some casting folk will offer you headphones when you're in the booth recording something at a casting session. Others will not. But ultimately, when you get in the studio, you have to be in control of your own toolbox. But you got to know what's in your toolbox before you get into the booth. Oh, and by the way, those Viagra commercials? The lead is a lady. Have you noticed?
The what commercials?
The lead. There's
the
commercials
Viagra
for
commercials.
Viagra.
Oh, yeah,
I was just
yeah.
sitting there talking about that, which is this by the by. It's amazing. That I just had to throw that
From
in.
Depends to Viagra.
Yeah.
We got to think. We're working our way
from depends
up.
if I don't know what that means. It'll be ED next. So yes, be in control of your toolbox, but keep listening to what's going on around you, and make sure you know what you sound like.
I don't know how many in the audience want to do voiceovers or get into it, or
Let's see a show of hands. Ah.
Well,
And how many of you are doing voiceovers already? Oh, wow.
good.
Okay, great.
well, then a lot of you know a lot of things we've been saying, and those of you who didn't, take it to heart, because you've gotten a really good tutorial.
I'm gonna ask a couple of questions that you guys have sent up, and we will let our fabulous panel answer. What is the most common mistake actors make when they start commercial VO or audiobooks VO? Lisa, I'm going to start with you.
I think the most common mistake is not asking when the job is going to record. When you're given an audition and you're given several dates that the job may record, it's not okay if it's recording on April 1st, 2nd, or 3rd, and you're not available the 1st and 2nd, but you are available the 3rd, but you just don't tell anybody that. You have to be available all 3 days. It doesn't mean you're not going to work all 3 days. It's just the choice of the production what day they're going to choose, and you have to be aware that, listen, things happen, people book other jobs and all that, but you have to let whomever your representation is know if I'm on a job from 10 to 2 on the 1st, but I'm available the 2nd and 3rd. Communication with your agent, communication with the casting person is so important and relevant, because although this sounds crazy, my client will blame me if you're not available.
Of course.
And it really is unfortunate. And, but it's just the way it is, because they kind of look to the immediate person who they've been in contact with. Well, didn't you check everybody's avail? I said, yes, but I can't put an entire session on first refusal for 3 days. Like, you're not allowed to do that. But anyway, the bottom line is, to your question, Sarah, communication with your agent, and just make sure you have all your ducks in a row with the production before you choose to audition for a voiceover. Voiceover auditions also now, a lot more than they used to, have callbacks, believe it or not. So if there is a callback, you have to be available for that as well. So that's.
Cool. Okay, thanks. Anybody else want to address this? The most common mistake?
You said that because she's so right. I'm sitting here going, God, did I ever screw up on Lisa? I hope to God not. But no, it really, and my agents every year, a couple times a year, they'll send out a general, like 5 alarm thing saying, we must know your schedule, you must communicate your schedule, and especially if you've got other things going on, like the impulse when you get a call for an audition is always to say yes, 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 yes.
Right,
but if they have the information about when you can be there, when it's going to book, and it may kill you, but yeah, God, that's I wouldn't have thought of that right away, but that's, yes, have your schedule straight, make sure your agents know it, and then double, triple make sure you know it. Even if you think you do, make sure it's written down and in your phone and in your whatever, because, yeah, ooh.
Could I add one?
Yeah, please.
I think from what I've seen, the number one mistake people make is, well, 2 mistakes. They don't take it seriously. They think, oh, it's just voiceover, whatever. And they don't do any research, which we were talking about before. Another great resource that I use every day is iSpot. I think it's iSpot.tv. But anytime I have an audition, I go on iSpot or YouTube and I watch other spots with that same product. And maybe they're going to change the direction, and obviously they want to change the voice, but it's good to see the taste of the client and to see what kind of music they like and what kind of voice they liked before. And I think a lot of people poo-poo doing research for voiceover because they think it's just magic. You just go in and you book a voiceover and then you make money.
I think, too, kind of to piggyback on what you're saying, a lot of people, and some of these questions are, how do you get started? How do you get an agent? I think you also have to approach voiceover, if I didn't have an agent, if there wasn't a casting director, how could I get in the door? You have to think like a business person, which is basically what you're saying. So understand the product that you're auditioning for. And oftentimes, if you have an agent and you get a breakdown, the breakdown is going to give you so much information. Sometimes they give you a link to something that they want you to sound like, or the style of something. But it's important to understand the product, obviously, when you're auditioning for something. And a lot of people just kind of show up and don't put a lot of thought or effort into it. So I think that is important.
And then they're like, why am I not booking?
Right, right.
As you pointed out in the bios, I have been the voice of the Screen Actors Guild pension and health plans since their beginning. And if you listen to that, what I'm doing is very deliberate. I'm not talking too fast. I'm trying to be warm without, overindulgent or anything, because I figured that most people who are calling have a problem of some kind, and they need information. It's either about their earnings or their premium or their health. So you deal, it's just like everything else.
You're adopting an emotional point of view.
Whether you're doing a narration or a promo or a commercial or whatever.
Thank you. Somebody else asks, how important is it to have a website? Should it be separate from your acting website? Ladies?
Nobody asked me that, I'm sure.
I actually, I mean, I don't have a website myself. I have my reel is on Voice Bank. I have Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and all that stuff. But I always kind of like being a ninja a little bit with the spots that I have running, because sometimes I'll go in and a producer thinks they've discovered me, and they're like, "So glad we found you out of nowhere. I've never heard you
that's
before."
interesting.
So I don't
Okay.
know. I think people would say they would be for having a website or for not having a website. I don't really think there's.
That's a really interesting point of view, though, kind of being the new discovery.
Right. Yeah.
Everybody takes credit for you.
Right. Exactly.
Well, that does it. I'm taking my website down immediately. Anybody else?
Well, you know, I'm not the greatest at technology, but it just seems like things keep changing so that, like, you don't have to have a website. These days, it's so, I mean, sitting here thinking, especially listening to everybody, but to Joyce especially, because I remember when I first started, that your demos were really on a reel, you know, like Mission Impossible, which when I talk to little kids, they're like, they had tape recorders like that? You know, it was like that, and then the big thing were cassettes, oh my God, cassettes, and then the mini cassettes, and now it's just files.
Yeah.
So you can assemble sort of stuff and just send it along to people like that. What is it? I think I have Tumblr, and I think you can do, anyway, it keeps changing
Yeah.
to the extent. And I really like what you said, because now I don't feel guilty about not having one.
No, I think that's great. I've always thought, you know, website is your calling card. It's like your business card. And if people want to kind of check you out, what you do, all the different stuff that you do, they can go there. But so there's basically no hard and fast rule. But I'm curious, you were going to say something, Lisa.
Yeah, I mean, there's sort of six of one and half a dozen of the other. The one thing on my end that I don't like about websites when I'm prepping is this is a very fast-paced business in terms of the commercial world. And it's so fast that I can get a call in the morning saying, can you cast this afternoon? But we want half of our session to be people that we don't really know as well, or, you know, fresh, or whatever adjective they're going to use that day. But if I get a demo, you know, if I get a submission from an agent and say, you know, you should go onto their website and listen to their stuff, I don't have time.
Yeah.
Send me the MP3. Do they have their voiceover MP3 demo? That I'll listen to. And I'm so happy that actually it's all files now, because I don't have cases of CDs in my office. But if I have to go to your website and navigate it and flash and look at what I did and this quote and that quote, where's the voiceover stuff? And it just, you know, it's not that I don't want to navigate your site, it's literally that I don't have time. But the other side of that is I've cast jobs where clients say, we need to see other work they've done. And while they can't, they cannot ask, has this person ever done a Poland Spring water spot before? They can't ask that. They can sort of get around it by saying, we'd like to see a website that showcases some of the work that they've done. Sometimes they want to see that just because they want to believe that you are an actor.
Is that on camera or voiceover?
For voice. We just cast a radio spot with a fairly young guy, meaning the talent was young, and the producer didn't know really who he was, and said, you know, I just want to see it, some kind of, even if it's an on-camera reel or a film so that he was in. And he had some stuff. He had some, you know, whatever was, I don't know, Law and Order or whatever, and he booked the job. Mm-hmm. You know, it was like this, everyone needs to be 100% sure because everybody's afraid of losing their account. So, you know, and it's rough. So it's sort of, I think websites are a good thing. I just think if you expect me to navigate through it when I'm prepping, that might be unrealistic.
Okay. I love this question because it gets on my last remaining nerve. Haven't heard upspeak in this group. It is everywhere on television and radio. Will it ever go away? I'll tell you what drives me crazy. And it's just, you know, this kind of talking. It really drives me crazy. and it kind of is sort of worming its way into voiceover a little bit. So, anybody got anything to say about
I know, I'm with
upspeak
you.
and the kind of the de-evolution of speech patterns?
Yeah. I know what you're talking about. I think that's got a name. It's called vocal fry. I
Yeah,
think,
vocal
or something like that.
fry.
And everybody talks so fast
There's a place
now.
for it. There's a place for vocal fry.
Hell
There's a-
is the place
there's a-
for sorry.
No, no.
No, it is something that's being done. For me, I just have to listen and just not get frustrated by it.
Is
because-
that sort of thing being cast? I mean, do people want that? Do you ever?
I mean, I don't think that I get breakdowns where they say we want somebody to sound like this. I mean, that almost sort of speaks a little bit more to that whole Valley Girl situation
Yeah.
that was in vogue 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I would say not polished, perhaps.
Yeah.
Bring your own rhythm to the sentence, which is something that I do say sometimes because I don't want it to sound structured. But sometimes my client will say to me, we want it to be delivered in a way that is going to stand out from the other auditions kind of thing. And when you think about it, there are certain words that should be together and should be apart and should be slightly emphasized and you want to make it sound like something is ending. You don't want to make it sound like it's not ending because that's not in vogue. A sentence has a period.
Right.
Right?
Do you ever get people in an audition that speak like that normally?
I don't.
Yeah. Okay.
No.
I will say this, though, and that's that I think that since there's so much reality television on, and a lot of the people that are in reality TV shows that have sort of emerged, I'm making generalizations, but I hear that kind of sound
Yeah.
in that arena, and I have been to auditions where they will reference someone like that.
Right.
Like, we're looking for a sound like blah, blah, blah. I invariably won't get it because I can't even
Yeah.
really fake it that well.
Yeah,
But you
yeah.
were saying, you
Well, did you listen to the This American Life episode about vocal fry and about this? They were talking about how they get letters every day about their female hosts and how they're so annoyed by the way they speak. And they get really mean mail about it. And basically what they said is that every generation hates the way the next generation speaks. So I think it's probably inevitable. And you hear it at the end of my sentences as well. What's interesting to me sometimes is now there are 23-year-old copywriters, so they will direct a spot. I'm trying to...
Easy, Nancy. Easy.
And it's-
easy.
Well, it's tricky because sometimes they will give a line reading like, sometimes your birth control fails. And I'm like, I don't know what to do with that. And I try to come up with my own interpretation of that, but if that's the way 23-year-olds are speaking now, we're probably going to hear it on TV soon.
But all of
Alrighty
it, but
then.
whenever you listen to these voices and the vocal fry and what you had just been talking about, that is all grist for the mill.
Right.
One of the joys of living in a city that rewards walkers is the fact that you have the subway, you have buses, you can listen to folk. I'm a sponge. I don't know about you folk, but when you've got to do 4,700 voices in an audiobook, you listen to voices, and I like stick it in my little file in the back, because I know I'm going to be pulling that thing out at some point in my career. So, no. And when you live in New York, I don't have to get in my car every morning and drive to a studio and come back, and you live this isolated, like living in an ice cube in a tray. Horrifying. Here, you get to be in California. Here, you can mess with folk and let them mess with you. It's good. There are no germs, trust me. Be a sponge, an audio vocal sponge. You'll be better for it.
But she raises, that's wonderful. She raises a very interesting point when the copywriter will finally try to tell you
Oh,
what
yeah.
he is looking for. And I mean, and sometimes it's, well, my wife, blah, blah, blah. So it's the old wonderful line about acting, don't listen to what I say, listen to what I mean. So you have to try to
Yeah, part of your
put
job
together
is
and
being able to
understand
interpret.
what he's getting at and what he means. Because you can't take line readings, you really can't from them.
But you have to act as if you are.
Yes,
you can't
that's
go,
right.
that's horrible. I'm
Yeah.
not doing that.
Yeah.
You know. I mean, as many times as you might want to. You know, you have to I mean, I don't want to give away any trade secrets right now.
But that's part of the tool bag that you have, is being able to understand, to decipher the direction, not just to take it, but to interpret it.
Yeah, but very often I'll just get out of my own way, and if the producer is really frustrated, I will say, you know what? Even a director in a TV thing that I'm doing, just give me a line reading. Tell me what you would like, because I get out of my own way and get off the diva rubbish. There's time. We have a time crunch here. Time is money. He has to bring this in a finite amount of time. Tell me what you want. It's ultimately going to come from me. So let me hear what it is you're hearing, rather than finding all these grandiose vocabularial methods of trying to tell me what the heck it is you want. Just tell me and do
But
it.
I will say this, just as a comeback, there have been times where they'll say, I want it to go, and you go,
Yeah.
and they go, no, you're going down. I'm going,
Right.
oh, no, you're going down. Where I mean,
That's the point.
you have sessions like that
Who's
where
on
I felt
first?
my pulse racing and my eyes are twirling in my head. And I've actually, I mean, as diva as I've gotten in a session, I've had to finally say, you really actually are going, I just need you to know that you are doing that. I'm doing what you're doing. So if you really want me to go down, you know, I've had to break it down like that.
Which
Well-
reminds me of the William Shatner YouTube. You seen that? Just check out the William Shatner. You ever seen that? The William Shatner.
Celebrity voiceover.
Yes, when he gets direction in a studio. If you haven't checked that out, a glass of wine tonight when you get home. Look it up.
Well, also, you need to have patience and recognize that you work for them.
That's right.
I'm sure all of us have been in situations where we're on doing take 13
That's all?
or 21 for him or her, or conferences in the room. And it's not just you alone, usually it's me and a guy or whatever. And don't you think at some point the engineer often is the guy who says, I think you ought to listen to take 2 again.
Yeah. They can be good.
And son of a gun, they listen to take 2 and say, yeah, that was right.
Yeah, it's a standing joke. Yeah.
And I've been in sessions where the guy who was a big shot I was working with, he really got his anger up at the takes, and you can't do that. You have to lead them like children. You know, I was doing a commercial for Benton & Bowles voiceover, and they changed the whole campaign. And Tom Hendy was the casting director, and he called me up. He said, they've changed the whole campaign. Totally different approach. He said, but I want you to come in. Would you come in and read for it? I said, sure. He read everybody blind. No names, nothing. I was number 3 and number 5. There were a total of 6 people. And I was on the campaign they were dumping. And he told me afterward they had a whole conference. She'll probably appreciate that because she deals with these people on this level that we don't see. Had a whole conference on blah, blah, blah. And they finally got it down to they like number 3 and number 5. And Tom told me afterward, that, which took a lot of guts, that he told them, he said, well, you've not only selected the same person in both, but she's the one on the campaign you're changing. So, you know, they're not geniuses either.
But we mean that
True
with all
story.
due respect.
Right. I think you want to have compassion for the writers as well. I like to come in, because sometimes you see a room full of nervous people, and they're worried that what they wrote and what they put all this money into this big spot or into this big project, and they're worried that it's not going to work out. So I like to walk in with the idea of all your problems are solved. Here I am.
Yep.
And sort of put them at ease and make them feel like, okay.
Yeah, but you know, you got to be on your A game to be able to do that. You know,
Right.
you really have to have your skill set together when you walk in the door, because that's it.
Absolutely.
That's it. You're kind of, you know, it's like I think what you're saying, Joyce, is you're a little bit of the babysitter. You're a little bit of course, I'll take every piece of direction that you can give me because, you know, I'm here to serve you. But you're also directing. So it's kind of like, you know, you're wearing all these hats at the same time without really letting them know that you're wearing those hats at the same time. Your job is to read their minds when they can't tell you what they want.
And
to
the
let them know.
engineer is your best friend.
Absolutely.
Always remember that. The engineer will save your ass many a time, and he can control what happens. And he will get you jobs. I got more jobs from engineers and fellow performers than anywhere.
Here's a good question. What is the best way a radio broadcaster, on-air personality, or host of a show can transition into voiceover work?
Take an acting class. Because I think a lot of people think I have a beautiful voice, and obviously they know how to work the time, and they know how I don't know if they know how the beats work, but they know the musicality of a spot. But I think you would really need to take an acting class.
Right.
Back in, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I was just going to jump on that and say take a voiceover class too, because reading that copy and understanding copy is a lot different than the kind of
And
things that you'll get
sometimes
to.
it's harder for
It
people
can
like
be,
that
and-
because you get into a groove
That's
of
right.
how to, this is the way that I read copy.
Exactly.
And you can't, and it's not about the voice, it's not
Right.
about the sound.
And a lot of
so-
radio people really, not a lot, but some feel like they know how to do it.
Yeah.
You can't tell them anything. And
Right.
So that kind of
Right.
a class could work too.
Back in September, I taught a master class, an audiobook master class in LA. And I had people from everywhere, Toronto, Australia, all over the place. I had, it was a small class, and it was 2 days of kamikaze work, you know, on subtext and breathing and connecting with the material and doing your homework and blah, blah, blah. And this one guy from Australia came from radio, and he was desperate he schlepped all the way over from Australia to do my class and wanted to do audiobooks. And he could not get out of his radio head voice. And I made that class stare at him as I broke him down for about 20 minutes in the kindest way possible. Just saying, and I did it this way. I said to him, I gave him a chunk to do, and he brought chunks with him to work on in the class. And I said to him, give me less, give me less. That's great, give me less. Do it again, slower, give me less, give me less. And they watched as we slowly peeled back the onion to get away from all this vocal fluctuation of this murder scene at a restaurant, and it was awful. But when he finally understood that what he needed to say was, and he stood there with a gun in his hand, and he looked at the two people in the corner and said, "This is your last day on earth," you know? And finally, I had stripped him bare, and he gave me, he was spectacular.
That's another story.
The schwitz was pouring down his arms, you know? But he walked away at the end of it, and he was very, very tall, and he pulled me up and hugged me at the end of it all and said it was like going to a revival meeting. To completely disassociate himself from one mode that he was utterly comfortable in, and to challenge himself like he'd never been challenged before.
I have to say, I have the utmost respect for audiobooks. I find they're really difficult. I've auditioned for them, not gotten them, and I'm going to take a class in how to do them. It's so
Intimate.
intimate and complex. I mean, I guess I feel the way about audiobooks within the voiceover business as I feel that everyone should feel with voiceover in general, because it really is difficult work, and when it's done well, it's sublime. There's nothing better.
I did too, and I just couldn't sit there all alone doing it
I
all.
want to move through some of these questions because we only have
Sorry.
a couple of minutes. No, it's great. It's good. Time just flies when you're having fun. Okay, do you still need an agent to get voiceover auditions? Lisa, I'm going to direct this to you.
Okay. No. You need an agent to get you basically into casting offices, to help you get into, even though I'd like to think I'm the only person casting in New York, I'm not. No, but I think that there are a lot of schools around, and there are a lot of classes around, and there are a lot of, meet agents and casting director things around, and I think that those things are really beneficial. The only thing that I will say is, if you want to take one of those classes or one-days or seminars, you need to be ready to meet the casting people. You need to, if you're promoting your demo, that demo really needs to be produced from a place where you feel that you have the best product to showcase to me. Because you get one shot, and I remember the Ross reports, which is now called the call sheet, said that your voiceover demo is like your headshot 40-fold. I mean, it's so, it can be ripped apart so easily, and it can be mediocre really easily, and you can also not perform to the ability of it when you go into an audition. If you have a demo that's produced really well, and you have a friend that works at Sirius XM, and they're going to produce it for you for free, and they're going to make it sound great and pacing and all that, and I get you into an audition and I say, you've got to take like 4 or 5 seconds off, and you have no idea what that means.
Or you're on take 20.
Right. When you come into to a casting audition, you get 3 chances, at least never 1 for me, 2 to 3 to 4, let's say. But when you're doing your demo, you're doing those takes over and over and over, and they're trying to perfect. And this, you have to really be ready. So, your original question was?
I don't remember. It doesn't matter. I'm fascinated.
You have to have an agent. Okay. Here's the thing about agents. Agents are fabulous. I mean, I think I have a very solid relationship with all of the agents in New York City. I think that the agents in New York don't push people on you that are not right for my casting jobs. That's what I respect the most about agents in New York. I think ultimately your goal is to get an agent, because they will facilitate opportunity that you meeting people here and there won't.
I just want to make a comment on something that you said, and also about the agent thing. When you're shopping for an agent, or you're going in to do a reel, and I always say this to people, never go in to record your demo until you are at the level where you can go into an audition and take direction, and if you have to shave 4 seconds off, you can shave 4 seconds off without it sounding rushed, or you can turn on a dime in terms of direction, because you do yourself a disservice. Anybody can make you sound good in a studio, but when you're ready to stand and deliver and you can't do it, you got, 1 shot to make a good impression, and if you don't, then you just shot yourself in the foot. Another mistake that I think a lot of people make is when you're putting a reel together, you try to do everything. Oh, I'm funny, I'll do a funny spot. I can be sarcastic. Oh, I'm sexy. It's like, who are you? When you roll out of bed, who are you? And then work from there. But there are people that specialize in animation. They're going to do an animation reel. They're going to get the animation auditions. So just because you can do a funny voice doesn't mean it belongs on your reel, right? So be specific. It's the thing that I think about this business is that it is so, I keep using the word intimate, because it is so nuanced. And the thing that I love about this work so much is that it is so minute. That it's like a painting on the head of a pin.
It's delicate.
Yeah, it's very delicate, and it's you have to be able to, because it's about relaying emotion with your voice.
And yet, 40 takes later, that freshness that you walked in with has to still be there.
That's right.
Because you're going to go to lots of auditions where the guy will say, "Do what you did at the audition."
Yeah.
And there were 40 auditions between that one and
But
this.
guess what? If you're MP3ing auditions at home, I never throw out my MP3 auditions because if I book the job, I want to know what I did that they liked, so I
Right.
can refer back to it. Okay, here are a couple. We got a couple of questions about celebrities doing voiceovers. What are your feelings? Are celebrities taking a lot of work from the veteran non-celebrity artist? I'd like to address this.
I would like to just say about it, yes, yes. But, you know, often they get a lot of money for what they're doing, a lot more than maybe we would have. And we get pension and health contributions on all that money.
Yep.
So I don't completely resent the athletes and the stars because they contribute
They keep
a
the
lot of
funds
money
healthy.
to our welfare.
Yeah, absolutely. I think too. It's like, you know, if I can afford a celebrity and I'm a client, it's like, yeah, it's a sexy thing to have a celebrity. Is it taking work away from the rest of us? Absolutely. Can I tell you the number of times I've walked into an audition and they say we're looking for a Susan Sarandon or Sigourney Weaver. You know, they want that, so it's become kind of a template. But again, it's like that's the nature of the business. It's going to change. It's going to change.
I'm really happy Joyce said what she said because that does put it a lot into perspective. Yeah, I guess I'll just I'll stay with that because I'll look sometimes and see people and go, my God, you made like $30 million just for your last season of Friends. Why? You know, it can be a little bit frustrating, but it's something that existed before. It will exist again. I mean, I guess the big change, maybe voiceover is different than on camera, but the big change is that a lot of celebrities that used to do commercials would do them in other countries,
Right.
and you wouldn't see them here. And to my recollection, growing up, the stars that did voiceovers truly had wonderful voices. They had distinctive voices, like I knew who they were. My issue, if you want to call it that now, is I wouldn't know who half the people are unless someone told me, because I'm not hearing anything that I don't hear a lot of my friends doing, and I don't hear something that's really distinctive that says, you know, that's Walter Cronkite, that's Fred Gwynn, that's
But the agency producer goes home to his wife and his golf buddy, and he
And they have
says, "Guess who
pictures."
I was directing today?"
That's it.
so
Yep.
that's
You
mine.
know, you can't fight it.
This is one for Barbara. Like commercial voiceovers, is it necessary to create a demo for audiobook voiceover? If so, how long should it be? And should it showcase different genres of books to show different colors of the voice?
Audio.
10 seconds.
Yeah, in 10 seconds.
Well, there are audiobook demos. Do what you know how to do. Well, I told you, you need to know what's in your toolbox. Find out where you're comfortable in the audiobook world. There's nothing worse than not being prepared, you know, when you find out in chapter 18 that person you've been voicing as a Texan is from Glasgow. So, do your homework. Always do your homework. Do you want a reel? Sure. Should you have it on your website? You can, absolutely. But as we have been told, make it easy to access. Never put your photo on a demo reel. Never do that. Not if
Where
you
were you
want to
when
do
I needed
audiobooks.
you? Where
What?
were you when I needed you?
Yeah, never. Well, I'm still here, babe. We'll have a drink. We'll talk.
Do we have to stop, Melissa, or do we have a couple of minutes? One more question.
Because we're having such a good time, aren't
Let me
we?
see. Okay. Should I set up a recording studio in my apartment? Melissa.
I'm going. I'm going to address that. You know, with technology today, and it's very, very simple and not as expensive as it was even 6 or 7 years ago to set something up in your home. Here's the issue with setting something up in your home. I have a job because I direct actors for voiceover auditions. Now, will I accept an audition via an MP3? I never do unless the person is a request and can't make it, or I really want them on my casting and they're not in town, and you know, it's not their fault, they didn't know I was going to have this audition. However, I talk on the phone, Stacy and I talk on the phone to every actor that's going to MP3. If they send in an MP3 of the cast, of the audition, without speaking to us, they either need to call us or it doesn't get submitted. Because you directing yourself at home with this studio in your pajamas and your, with your coffee and not, having to have actually gotten dressed and actually socialized with the people in the room is really a disservice the more you do it, because you get way too comfortable in your own skin. It's not the real world of voiceover and bookings and auditions and pounding the pavement in this city, which I find is something that I just have so much respect for actors who are really willing to just be there and show up, and they want to get direction. And as much as you think you can direct yourself, you really can't, because you're just going to be too critical, or you're going to do it over and over and over and over, and everything all the ladies were saying about not doing something to make it not fresh anymore, you're going to do all of that, and you're going to think the freshest take is take 58. When you're at home, and you're, watching TV and sort of recording on a commercial break.
And yet, what if most of the auditions that you get are MP3 auditions from your agent's office?
I mean, if you're lucky enough to get that, I think that, yes, you have to perform as best to your ability. I know there are a lot of in-house auditions as well, and I know there are some people that work in-house at these agencies that do a nice job. I just think getting direction from someone besides yourself is an invaluable tool that will always make you sound better in terms of a performance. Yeah. But I don't say don't do them. Of course you're going to do them. The way of the world right now that changed my business a lot is the in-house auditions and the voice bank auditions. My favorite kind of phone call is from a client saying, yeah, we did a voice bank thing, and geez, like everyone kind of sounded the same. Really? And we just don't want to weed through those 200 people. Okay, let me do that for you.
Right.
So,
yeah,
that's it.
I think that home situation is more used, in my experience, by the guys and gals who are primarily doing promos.
Yeah.
Because that's a whole different thing. That's convenience.
Yeah.
And if they have CBS TV 2 wants you to do the promo for the morning news and then one for the afternoon news
And
and
it's a
one for
daily
the
gig
evening
or a,
news, they're really the same thing. It isn't like they're buying your voice. And they know you can deal with it, and you're not dealing with copy like we do in commercials. Right. So I think that's where it's been probably good for some people, terrible for all the dear engineers and recording studios we all worked for.
But also, if you're thinking about setting up a studio just to do auditions, really all you need is a decent USB mic and a decent, simple software like Audacity or something like that to do an audition. You don't need to spend a lot of money or really, go nuts setting up a studio.
Can I ask a super quick question?
Yes.
You mentioned that there should be specificity in a reel. How do you introduce variety then?
Well,
I can answer that if you want.
okay, go ahead.
If you want. This is one of the most common mistakes when you're making a reel. Making a reel and having range doesn't mean you're going to sound 10, 50, you're going to sound French. You can vary your reel with pacing, with product, with slight vocal pitch that's going to still sound like you. And the concern with reels is never about variety. In terms of what you think you're capable of. I think you really need to go with your strength, and then once you get in the door and you get to meet casting people, we will give you the opportunity to go outside of the box. But I think going outside of the box during, in a reel is just a disservice.
Also, it's like you have a version. Where'd you go? Where are you? There you are. You have a version of genuine happy. You have a version of, you know, I don't know if you're a sarcastic person. You have a version of, you know, but whatever your moods are that are authentic to you, however, I always tell people, listen to yourself in conversation on the telephone. Record yourself in telephone conversations. You will discover so much about how you sound and how you speak and what your colors are by just listening to yourself when you're not in real time. You know what I'm saying? So, but just, you know, work with somebody that understands how to bring out the best in you when you're putting together a reel so that you're not all over the map. Yeah, what? Is that
Could
it?
I
yes. Oh, there you
say
are. Hi.
one quick thing about the MP3 thing? I feel like I need to tell you. Even it's bad for Lisa's business, but I would say about half the spots I have running on TV right now were cast through VoiceBank. And I always get dressed, and I put my makeup on, and I put my heels on. I do. I put my heels on, and I record at home as if I'm at a session. And every audition, I think of producing the commercial. I think of what the final product should sound like. I don't do 50 takes, though. I limit my takes. But I really think about it ahead of time, and I don't just throw it away.
You actually put your heels on?
I do put my heels on. My husband thinks I'm crazy.
I have a whole
stand
new
there,
level
I
of
put my heels
respect
on.
for you. I'm telling you right now.
I do. People always say, "Oh, voiceover, it must be so fun. You get to go in your pajamas." But I don't go in my
I think
pajamas.
that's great.
No.
And sometimes sometimes you don't get the direction that you want to get, even when you're in your agent's office. I hate to say it.
Yeah.
But, so it's different. It varies. But anyway, we have to wrap this up. I want to
We
thank
could talk all
Jessica,
night.
Nancy, Lisa, Barbara, Joyce, Melissa, and Greg. Thank you so much.
And Sara Krieger.
You guys have been great. Thank you. And go on to VoiceBank and listen to all these great reels from these great ladies. Thank you for coming, and thank you for supporting the SAG Foundation.